Astronauts to the moon.
Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we have a problem.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue.
What you're seeing here is a mirage.
What's going on, everyone? It's Jaron from Jeranism, back with another video for you today. A short video. I just want to tell you a little secret I learned that will surely help me save some money, and perhaps I can save you a few bucks as well. Many people consider snail mail antiquated, but I still use it, and many of you might still use it to send birthday cards or Christmas cards perhaps, or even just letters to family and friends, or even postcards from places that you visit or vacation to. Currently in the United States, the price we are told is 55 cents per letter and 35 cents per postcard. Well, I'm about to show you how to send a letter or postcard for only 2 cents. But before we get started, let me just give you a few disclaimers here. First, this only works in the United States, so if you're in another country, I don't know their laws, and this video will not be very helpful to you. Also, I wouldn't send anything important or time-sensitive, like checks or important documents. I wouldn't use this method for those types of mailings either. And lastly, it is not for commercial use. It is only for personal use. So for sending to a friend or family member, something like that. Also, this will not work if you're trying to send something to a government agency. So if you're trying to send something to a jail or possibly the Social Security office, I would not use this method to mail anything to any government agency such as those. All right, so let's get started on how to mail a letter for only 2 cents. So this all started when I began posting my P.O. box, and I received quite a few letters, but one in particular stuck out. It was a letter from a man, Ted Eldon, and you'll notice something weird about this letter in the upper right-hand corner. I saw a 2-cent stamp. I said, what? How did I get this mail? So I did contact Ted, and I sent him an email and asked him, hey, what's going on? How are you able to send me this for 2 cents? And he sent me another one. So now you're looking at the second letter. On the back, gave me some instructions, but I could clearly see that it was possible at this point to send mail in the United States for 2 cents. I also noticed that Ted had a website that he put on his postcards to me that's called abodia.com, ABODIA.com. You should check it out. There is a ton of links to media lies, 9/11 truth. There's some links to some great videos like JFK to 9/11, Everything is a Rich Man's Trick, American history links, moon landing hoax videos, Sandy Hook links, sovereign citizen links, chemtrails, and so much more. And so I recommend that you check out Ted's site, abodia.com, as it is filled with a wealth of information for truth seekers. And thank you, Ted, very much for teaching me how to save money with this method. And as I usually do, as soon as I heard about this, I wanted to learn more about it and figured there has to be some videos on YouTube about it. And there aren't many, but I found some. And all of these videos that we'll be listening to are linked in the description. But here's the first one I found, and we'll listen to a small clip.
However, you can send a letter non-domestically without the United States, not in the federal zone. They're tricking you.
It was the description of this video that actually had the most information of any of the other videos we'll watch. In it, you can see it says take an envelope, place a letter inside, place a 3-cent stamp on it, address it to somewhere outside of the United States, which means any of the 50 states and not in Washington, D.C., any military base, any federal zone, and he says no zip codes. He then gives us a few examples, which are very helpful. And the hugely helpful thing here, and we'll come back to this, is he puts the Congress session of the law in his description. If we go down a little bit further, it says, why is this important? Well, because this will prove to the naysayers a bunch of things. Number one, that the zip code makes your address a federal zone. Number two, that the 2-letter abbreviation is seen as a federal state. 3, that the post office is a corporation and is tricking the average American into using, at this time, 55-cent stamps when only a 3-cent stamp is required. Also, I believe it's 2 cents. I'll show you that here shortly. That all 50 states are without the United States, and that common knowledge of the government is often misunderstood. And lastly, that the United States can mean the federal government. Now, this particular gentleman said that we should also write the exact Congress session on any letter we send this way, and that's up to you. I didn't do it when I tested this method, but it doesn't hurt to include it because possibly a postmaster or post person may not know this exact law. So help them out. But now with this Congress info, I went to see what law we are invoking. So I searched Chapter 71, Section 23 of the 37th Congress, Session 111, and found a document labeled An Act to Amend the Laws Relating to the Post Office Departments. All right, great. a PDF from the Library of Congress, and all of these documents are in the description, so you can click those if you want to check them out yourself. So I started scanning this particular document looking for Section 23, and I was having a tough time. The document seemed to skip. So upon further examination, I noticed that the document is actually missing pages. If you see here, page 701 ends with a hyphenated word post, and the next page starts with shall, which doesn't fit the previous page at all. A little closer look, and I realized that this document goes from page 701 to 709, skipping pages 702 to 708. Very interesting. So I had to do a little more searching and finally found the entire document for the 37th Congress, which is actually a 577-page PDF, but it was now easy because I could go right to the missing pages of 702 to 708, and there it was, Section 23. Let's read it. It states, "And it be further enacted that the rate of postage on all letters not transmitted through the mails of the United States, but delivered through the post office or its carriers, commonly described as local or drop letters, and not exceeding 1/2 ounce in weight, shall be uniform at 2 cents, and an additional rate for each 1/2 ounce or fraction thereof of additional weight, to be in all cases prepaid by postage stamps affixed to the envelope of such letter, but no extra postage or carrier's fee shall hereafter be charged or collected upon letters delivered by carriers, nor upon letters collected by them for mailing or for delivery." So, that was the end of Section 23. Now, there's a lot more to read. You can read all of this document if you want. There's tons of stuff in here, but that is the particular law that we are invoking. So let's continue. At this point, I was a little bit confused because I thought the USPS was the post office, and to me, I've always thought that the USPS was a government agency. Well, I found out that the post office was, but not the USPS. I then realized why, when the government shut down, why the mail did not. You'll see here that the USPS is an independent agency, and that something happened in 1970 called the Postal Reorganization Act, and that in that act, the USPS became an independent agency. So we're going to follow this now to the Postal Reorganization Act, signed by Tricky Dick Nixon in 1970, and we find some hocus pocus is at play. In 1970, Congress abolished the United States Post Office, which is one of the few government agencies explicitly authorized by the U.S. Constitution. So how was it abolished? Well, it created the USPS, a corporation-like independent agency with an official monopoly on the delivery of mail in the United States. Let's read. "The United States Postal Service shall be operated as a basic and fundamental service provided to the people of the government of the United States, authorized by the Constitution, created by act of Congress, and supported by the people. The Postal Service shall have as its basic function the obligation to provide postal services to bind the nation together through the personal, educational, literary, and business correspondence of the people. It shall provide prompt, reliable, and efficient services to patrons in all areas, and shall render postal services to all communities. The cost of establishing and maintaining the postal service shall not be appointed to impair the overall value of such service to the people." You'll also notice a little bit further down it says the Postal Reorganization Act exempts the USPS from the Freedom of Information Act, disclosure of information of a commercial nature, including trade secrets, whether or not obtained from a person outside the Postal Service, which under good business practice would not be publicly disclosed. So in 1970, the executive branch piece of the Post Office ceased to exist, but the duties and obligations were taken over by the USPS, which is now a private organization, a government-regulated monopoly. So then I realized that the post office employees are union workers. They work for a private business, the USPS, a for-profit corporation with a government-regulated monopoly, and they still have to deliver mail that is addressed the old way for the same price. So when you choose to send mail the way we do now, with the abbreviated state and with the zip code, what you're actually doing is you're authorizing that additional price. You're saying, I choose to use the USPS for their prices to send my mail. However, we just saw that Congress has already said what the United States Post Office is responsible for and the price that we are to pay for letters. So guess what? We can still pay that price. Let's continue. So the post office still exists within the USPS. You just have to know how to address your mail. So now we're going to see a couple people talking about it. They're going to tell us about sending non-domestic versus domestic, the geographical United States versus the corporation of the United States, the legal fiction. So we're going to listen to a couple other people just so you know I'm not the only one saying this. But let's check out a few videos that I found on YouTube. There's very few, but there is some. So this here is a great video. This guy's telling us that there's so much info out there that we simply aren't told. that we are choosing to use the USPS as a business rather than was originally planned. But let's go ahead and just listen to a portion of what he's got to say.
Now, hold on a second. I know. Cost of mail is ridiculous, right? Let's see. 100 mailings, and that's going to cost me, what, 49 bucks? That's trouble. But what if I could tell you that you could mail 2 cents per envelope? 2 cents per. Tested this all over the country, and it works. What it is you're invoking something that has always been there, but nobody wanted you to know. It's called the General Post Office. It still exists.
All right, the next video is from 2013 or so, and I thought it was interesting when you scroll down to the comments, you'll see somebody from just 4 months ago who says, just sent a letter from Cali to Texas for 3 cents. It works. But let's listen to this guy talk about it for a little bit.
You use the U.S. Post Office, not the United States Postal Service. They're two different entities. The U.S. Post Office was created by Congress as mandated by the original Constitution. In the 1960s, the U.S. Post Office was changed to the United States Postal Service, which is a separate corporate entity. So the U.S. Post Office still exists within the U.S. Postal Service.
And so at this point, it was starting to make a little bit of sense. All you needed to know how to do was to address a letter correctly, and you would be technically using the post office, and the corporation, the USPS, must still adhere to its original bylaws. Then I found this video, also from 2013. An interesting comment here below says, still works in 2018. We have another comment from somebody also saying it works, and further down, a very interesting comment, someone said, wow, it worked. Interesting, shocked. I was skeptical, but proven wrong. We'll now listen to a small clip from his video.
Well, I'm mailing things outside of the government, and there's a specific way you need to address your mail if you want to mail something non-domestic. Domestic basically means within the government. So what most of you do when you mail a letter, you're mailing something domestically. You're mailing something through government territory, through federal territory. Now, when you're a child in school in America, you're taught how to address envelopes, you're taught how to write letters, things of that nature. And what they teach you is, how to write a letter to someone, and they show you, put the person's name, their address, put their town or city, and then you want to abbreviate their state, and you want to put their zip code, right? Because that tells you exactly where things are. So when you mail something to the Postal Service, they can find that exact address and deliver it. Well, there's certain things that make that letter go through a federal zone, such as abbreviating the state on an envelope means you're mailing it within the United States government. It's a government territory. The United 50 States is the government, but every single one of the 50 states is its own territory. So the idea here is to mail something not within the 50 states as a whole, but you're mailing something from one state to another state that has nothing to do with the government.
All right, so enough background. Now I'll tell you how to address your mail so that you can use this constitutionally assigned post office and not the corporation-like private business, the USPS, which will be happy to take your 55 cents per letter, but also must deliver mail that follows the rules of mailing non-domestically. So I've already tried this and it works. First thing I did was bought some 2-cent stamps that cost 40 cents for a sheet of 20. I got them at the post office counter. I then wrote a letter to myself from my P.O. box and dropped it in the blue mailbox outside the post office, and it got to my house 1 day later. I then called a friend, David Weiss, and told him about it, to which he said, that's absolute bullshit. I said, okay, well, I'll send one to you too. And why don't you check your mail in a few days? Then 3 days later, I got a text from him showing my letter on his counter. Obviously, it got from California to Connecticut for 2 cents. So, how to address your letter or postcard correctly. First thing you want to do when you mail a letter or a postcard, you are mailing within the government territory if you use a zip code or an abbreviated state. So remember, you are invoking something that has always been there. Someone just didn't want you to know. The General Post Office still exists and makes sure letters go from point A to point B, but you cannot use a zip code. I write on mine zip exempt, so you might want to do that. You must also spell out the entire state. You cannot use a 2-letter abbreviation. That is copyrighted by the federal government, so don't use those, whatever state you're sending it to, and your return address must be the complete state. Also, I may not have mentioned you cannot mail this way to Washington, D.C., since that is a federal zone. So what a zip code actually does is it's telling the post office that you're sending your letter within the federal zone or within the corporate United States. And the corporate United States is located within the District of Columbia. So when you use a zip or a 2-letter abbreviation, the cost is going to be 55 cents. However, you can still send a letter non-domestically without the United States, not in the federal zone. They're basically tricking you. You only need to pay 2 cents as long as you don't put a zip code and no state abbreviation. All right, and this way it's non-domestic without the United States. So let me walk you through it step by step just so you see exactly what's going on here. First, grab yourself an envelope, then you put a 2-cent stamp on it. And then if you want, according to some videos that I've seen, you should write these exact words in the upper right-hand corner. I didn't do it, and the letter still got both to myself and to Connecticut, but it's up to you. I don't see a harm in doing it. And you would write on the top, first class non-domestic. Then you put BK 12, Statutes at Large, Chapter 71, Section 23, 37th Congress, Session 111. At that point, you can go ahead and put in your return address in the upper left-hand corner. And when you do that, make sure you spell out your name and then spell out your address. Remember to make sure that you spell out boulevard or way or street, as I've heard that can have an effect on it as well. Not positive. Again, I didn't have that results in my little tests, but you should go ahead and do that. Also, make sure you spell out the full city and the complete and total state. So do not use the 2-letter abbreviation. And then underneath it, I wrote zip exempt. Okay. And then last thing you want to do is address your letter or postcard. And in the to address, you would do the same thing. Full name of the person you're sending it to, their full address, including the word street, not the abbreviation, etc., etc. And then you would also put their city, comma, and then spell out the complete state that you're sending it to and place zip exempt below that. And you can send mail for only 2 cents. So in other videos before, I've saved you 90% if you're a cigarette smoker, and now I just saved you 90% if you send regular old mail through the post office. All right, and so now you too can save money by using the post office and not the USPS. I appreciate you watching. Hit like if you did. Subscribe if you'd like as well. If you're new to my channel, check out my other videos to see the many, many ways we are being lied to, and by how working together and informing each other we can make a better world for everyone. I remind you to do your own research, because when you do, you'll never again believe what you've been taught. On the way out, we have a child who just found out that he can save a lot of money by mailing letters for 2 cents in the United States, so let's watch him. Till next time, this has been Jeranism. Peace!